There you are. Hello, I have just read this Edible Economics, The World in 17 Dishes, and this is by Ha-Joon Chang. I'll tell you what people say about Ha-Joon Chang. A delightful writer, Chang uses a series of fascinating nuggets about ingredients, prawns, bananas, spices, coconuts as a hook through which to explain some key concepts about economics, a rare gift for explaining complex ideas. That's B. Wilson from the Sunday Times. Dan Davies from The Guardian. Excellent. A fun book takes aim at the neoliberal order through the unlikely medium of food. I'm just reading you the back at the moment. And oh look, there's one from Owen Jones. I like Owen Jones. I watch a lot of his videos. A movable feast of alternative economic ideas wrapped up in witty stories about food from around the world. Ha-Joon Chang proves yet again he's one of the most exciting economists at work today. Probably agree with that. Another one of his books which I've read is this. Haven't reviewed it yet. I'm going to reread it. Overall, I think this is probably a better book, but that's because it's more about economics and less about food. I do like food though. This guy evidently loves food, so he's Korean. And the analogies he uses are good and interesting, and they have a point. And obviously, along the way, you learn a lot about food. And for example, when he's talking about banana republics, it's because an American banana growing company used to basically just own, exploit, and run slaves all over Africa and South America. So it was actually originally companies that had colonies, not countries. So the Dutch had their East India Company and the British had their East India Company, and you probably know all about those. The analogies are good. So he starts off talking about when he left Korea in the 80s to go and study at Cambridge, and the food was crap. Now, Korea doesn't have a lot of variety of food, but he thought the food was rubbish. But if you spoke to people and you told them the food was rubbish, especially in Britain, they got quite defensive. Then he talks about Soho. I love Soho, and how there was really good food in Soho, and it's where he first tasted all kinds of food, and also in the university cafeteria, he tasted different kinds of food, but they were generally crap. But then he says what happened is that the Brits became less defensive, and they just essentially acknowledged the fact that their food was pretty lame, and as a consequence now they're probably the most open to new foods of any people on earth. Certainly if you go to London, I think it's the best place in the world for food. And he talks about Soho. What's that got to do with the economics is he says that now, well, for the last few decades, in the West and in universities all over the place, everybody teaches neo-classical economics, and they completely ignore all the other theories of economics, and in fact they rubbish them just like the British used to with other foods. But actually, accepting other foods, other economic theories makes your diet richer, makes everything richer, makes your food better, so your economics is better if you don't just say, oh, there's only one type of economics and it's all true and everything else sucks, which is basically what the West has been doing for a long time. And as a consequence, everybody's life is a bit crapper. Because the thing with economics is it's not like, this is from the book, it's not like studying an old Nordic language or outer space. It actually affects us because it affects what we think is acceptable normal behavior. So neoclassical economics suggests that all people are fundamentally intrinsically selfish. So if anybody seems to do anything that isn't selfish, they're doing it for hidden selfish reasons. And so that shapes what we think is acceptable and normal behavior. It shapes how we behave. It shapes policy. And the UK is a very, very good example of how crappy government and shitty policies screw everybody's life up. There's that fucking moron, what was her name? Liz Truss, with her stupid neoliberal ideas. And then you have all these assholes who come on TV and they say, oh, her ideas have been proven to be true, by the way. Really? Alright, you're just talking out your fucking ass again. Yeah? Bloody politicians. So they're all stupid. You know what? You morons should all read this book. Any politicians out there, and all you fucking think tanks who go on TV to spread your bullshit, or you never know it's a think tank, it's somebody who's, they don't say where the funding comes from, especially not these think tanks that go on the British media. Let me have a cool drink here to calm down. See, I've got my eyes open and my brain turned on, so when I talk about our politicians, it pisses me off. Calm. Back to the book. Actually, so all this nonsense about free market and neoliberalism, it doesn't fucking work. By the way, he addresses that in here. So, and for everybody who thinks that the welfare state is the greatest enemy of capitalism, it was actually invented by Otto von Bismarck, one of the prime capitalists. But I had this in here because I want to read this part to you. So, he goes on about how, like we are open with food and we try new things, we should be open with our understanding of economic theories and be willing to actually explore them ourselves. So this paragraph I'm going to read you is part of that section. And a lot of economics, by the way, is based on myth. Economists like to tell us, it's factors, this is that. Rewind a bit. So the reason this guy went to Britain, to Cambridge, to do his postgraduate studies in economics was because in the States they'd already gone the way that Britain kind of always follows, only neoclassical economics, and he thought, well, that's bullshit, because there are all types of theories of economics, and there's a far greater range of them taught in the UK, in Cambridge, than I'll ever get in America. But everybody in Korea was, why are you going to the UK? You're stupid, you should go to the States. So he just told them a lie to get them off his back. But anyway, the best example of myth in economics is the distorted historiography that tells us Britain and the US became world economic hegemons because of their free trade, free market policies, when they were the countries that most aggressively used protectionism in order to develop their national industries. Protectionism is basically when the government raises tariffs and prevents the market from being free, so that nascent industries can grow and become powerful. This is exactly what happened in Korea with things like Hyundai that used to make joke cars. Nobody in Korea was allowed to buy Toyotas or any other cars, and so they had to drive inferior cars. But now they make some of the best cars in the world. They produce more cars than GM, so they kick the Americans' asses. There's another really good bit in here as well. As you can see, this is an interesting book. There's absolutely no form or function to what I'm talking about. I'm just recalling sections from the book as they come to me. Here's another good one. So this whole thing about post-industrialization or deindustrialization, the idea that we make things. As people make money, they buy what they need. So first of all, they need a house. So we need to build houses. But once everybody's got a house, we don't need to build houses. Wake up, UK politicians, we still need to build houses. And all your mates have got them, but most people can't afford them. And then after that, there's furniture, and everybody can afford food. And then you start buying things like toys. But after that, you don't need to produce anything because everybody's got everything. And so now you just need services, management consultants and finance and everything. Bullshit alert. Listen to this. The models for this are often Singapore and Switzerland, right? So, oh look, they don't produce anything, and they're the richest economies, and we should do what they do. It's because they have free markets and all this crap. God, I tell you, these policymakers and politicians really do talk out of their arses. Let me see if I can find this bit. I had it. It's quite a recent one. On this book, I actually read the acknowledgements. And it's interesting because this is a book that he started thinking about writing in 2007 and didn't get around to for about 15 years, which is comforting, because if you've ever tried to write a book and it doesn't go off the ground straight away, don't get discouraged. He wrote another few books in the meantime, one of which is this one, which I think is brilliant. I'll read it again. And he also talks about automaton with AI taking over jobs and everything. That's an interesting one. So, yeah, I might not be able to find it. Essentially, this whole idea of deindustrialization and the models for that, that our politicians love to go on about when they're trying to force more crap down our throats so that they can basically keep getting away with their bullshit and we don't make any money. They don't care. Yeah, it's like Nigel Farage, screw up the UK and then try and emigrate. Where was that? So they usually talk about Singapore and Switzerland, right, as these great examples of deindustrialization. We don't need to be industrialized. But actually, I might find it while I'm going through here. Switzerland is the most industrialized country in the world per capita. Guess what he talks about when he's talking about Switzerland? Powdered milk and chocolate. Chocolate was actually invented not by the Swiss. It was mainly a drinking chocolate from South America. And then when it came over to UK, they stopped putting chili in it. Bunch of wimps, the author calls them. And then the Swiss figured out they could mix it with milk, and they made milk chocolate. But it all went wrong. So then Nestle came up with powdered milk, which was because they had machines to do this. So it was part of industrialization. Thinking about the future. Yeah, I should have, give me just a second. I like reading sections from these books because they're so good. and I think it does well. Strawberry is not a berry. Did you know that? But this guy generally is the best writer. This guy may be, is it Gladwell? Malcolm Gladwell, who wrote Making the World Add Up. They are the people who've massively got me interested in economics, and I do think it's a really important thing to understand. You can either remain ignorant and live in a shitty place, or you can learn things and then try and spread those ideas to do things about them. Unfortunately, for the advocates of post-industrial society, Switzerland is actually the most industrialized economy in the world, producing the largest amount of manufacturing output per person. We don't see many made in Switzerland products, partly because the country is small, only around 9 million people, but also because it specializes in what economists call producer goods, machines, precision equipment, and industrial chemicals that ordinary consumers like you and me do not see. It is interesting to note that Singapore, another supposed post-industrial success story, is the world's second most industrialized economy. Using Switzerland and Singapore as models of post-industrial service economy is like, how shall I put it, using Norway and Finland to promote beach holidays. The advocates of post-industrialism fundamentally misunderstand the nature of recent economic changes. Do our politicians understand anything apart from... Anyway, what is driving deindustrialization? Deindustrialization is mainly changes in productivity, not changes in demand. Contrary to... I'm going to skip a bit here and read you the next section that I think is very important. Contrary to the myth of post-industrialism, the ability to produce manufactured goods competitively remains the most important determinant of a country's living standards. Many of the high productivity services that are supposed to replace manufacturing, such as finance, transport, and business services, e.g. management, consulting, engineering, design, cannot exist without the manufacturing sector because it is their main customer. These services look new only because they used to be provided in-house by manufacturing companies and thus connected as output of the manufacturing sector, thus counted as output of the manufacturing sector, but are now supplied by firms specializing in those services. This is why countries with strong manufacturing industries like Switzerland and Singapore also have strong service industries, although the reverse is not necessarily true. Moreover, manufacturing is still the main source of technological innovation. Even in the US and the UK, where manufacturing accounts for only 10% of economic output, 60 to 70% of research and development is conducted by the manufacturing sector. The figure is 80 to 90% more in more manufacturing-oriented economies like Germany and Switzerland. The belief that we now live in the age of post-industrial economy has been particularly harmful for the US and the UK. Since 1980s, these countries, especially the UK, have neglected their manufacturing sector under the illusion that their decline is a positive sign that their national economies are making a transition from an industrial economy to a post-industrial economy. This gave policymakers a convenient excuse for not doing anything about the decline of manufacturing. Instead, in the last few decades, the UK and US economies have been driven by overdevelopment of the financial sector, which came crashing down in the 2008 global financial crisis. Since then, the feeble recovery they have generated, economists have been talking about secular stagnation, is based on another financial and real estate bubble through historically low interest rates and the so-called quantitative easing program led by central banks. Very, very interesting. Very good. If you like food, you'll absolutely love it. I've just noticed it's a 14-minute review. I tried to keep them down to about 10 minutes and I've failed miserably. But it's really good. A really easy read. Probably another one like this that I'll read again. I recommend you read it. I recommend you learn about economics. Okay, I'm done. Have a good evening.